So, welcome everybody to episode 15 or 16 of It's Okay Not to Be Okay, our weekly group where I'm Miss Leuven if we haven't met before. And if you're at Barlow, I'm in the counseling office, so come by and see me if you're here this year, next year, whenever. And each week we have one or two people come and join us and just share whether it be their experience with the idea of it being okay to not be okay, or if people have specific things that they would love to share with high school students about just like what the last year's been like and how to make it through life from everything that we've learned. So today, Beth Coggins is joining us. She's a teacher at a different school across the country from us, and I'll let her introduce herself in a minute. But if you haven't joined us before, feel free. We'll kind of just do a conversation back and forth for a little bit. And then if you have questions that you want to ask, I have some questions we ask everybody that have sometimes been created by me, sometimes by students. And then we always want to make time for, like, if anyone who's here today has questions, feel free to either type them in the chat and then I will ask them for you, or I'll let you know at about 4:15 or 4:20 or so, and you're welcome to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you want to. No worries if you don't. And then also we do record these so that people can watch them later. But students, if you do unmute or turn your camera on, I make sure to block that out on the recording. So don't worry about that. Or if you have questions, you can email me afterwards. So all of that to say, welcome. Tell us a little bit about like who you are and kind of like what led you to want to say yes to come to this random event that I made. So.
Sure. My name is Beth Coggins. I am a first grade / kindergarten teacher. I bounce back and forth. This year I taught first, but next year I'm going back to kindergarten. I live in North Carolina, right outside of Asheville. And I guess I was willing to do this just because this year and last year teaching through COVID has just been a lot. To the point of where like I didn't want to do it anymore, even though I know that this is what I'm called to do. And so figuring out how to ask for help and understanding myself that there's nothing wrong with asking for help. I went to my doctor just for annual physical, and she knew I was a teacher, and she just started my physical with, "How are you?" And I just completely like lost it and broke down. She's like, "Okay, we're not going to do the physical part. We're just going to talk about you and your mental state." And it kind of just started from there, and just what I've learned in just the last couple of months of just changing, I guess not necessarily my lifestyle, but just being okay with asking for help in the last couple months just to get through the end of this year teaching in COVID and trying to figure out what I'll do next year should it still be weird when I start school again.
Cool, thanks. I'll just jump in with a fun question we like to ask, since I don't know how many folks here have been to North Carolina. So tell us what your favorite thing about where you live is, or North Carolina.
So North Carolina, it has all the seasons and all the things. Like you can start in the mountains and just drive about 5 to 6 hours and you're at the beach. So depending on what you're in the mood for, it doesn't take long to get there. I live in the mountains. So my favorite part about living here is just when I'm driving, just the view, and the hikes. And I don't know, just, I live in a quirky little town, and just seeing all the different people all the time, with lots of local food and local things to do. It's not so much commercialized as like the big cities.
Cool, thanks. And if you have anything that you're excited about for the summer, I know you mentioned you're doing summer school, but what's something that after this last year and a half, you're looking forward to about summer?
Yeah, so I had already decided to teach summer school before our state decided they were going to pay teachers very, very well for summer school. So I am excited to hopefully pay off some debt. But we only have summer school Monday through Thursday. So I've already decided like Friday is going to be a day for me where I either do a little bit of like catch up errands, but also like planning trips and things to do. My dad and I are big Atlanta Braves fans, so Atlanta is not too far of a drive from us. So we'll probably go to a couple games and just kind of, I don't know, relaxing, since even though I was stuck at home for a year and a half, it just isn't the same as just kind of doing things for me with people. So I'm excited about a little bit of normalcy while taking a break on at least Fridays.
Yeah, it's really different to spend a day at home by choice than because it's the only option.
Right. And I'm an introvert, so quarantine was not terrible for me. But then there were times where like I wanted to be invited, even though I'll probably say no, I'll find a reason not to show up. But it's nice to be invited again, even though I don't really want to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how that works. Like as we reopen, like the feelings that come up for those of us that were also fine being at home.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's see. Thinking of the last year and a half, what do you think that you've touched on it a little bit, but like what are some things that you've learned about yourself through quarantine and the pandemic?
I liked quarantine. I wouldn't say I loved it. I mean, there were some times where I was done with being stuck in my apartment. But I think I was able to shine a little bit more so in teaching, is because I am a tech savvy computer person. So I was able to, like, the skills I have tried to teach everyone at my school for years, and nobody wanted anything to do with it because they were stuck with pencil paper and making worksheets. So I was able to kind of shine through that to kind of teach them how to do all that while teaching 6-year-olds how to learn through a computer screen. And I learned, for me, just being more flexible. And I couldn't make any plans. Like, even if I had a plan on how something was going to work, you never knew like what was going to change, whether it came from like the state or the governor or whatever our mandates were. So just being able to kind of go with the flow. As introverted as I am, I'm also a pretty organized person. So not knowing definitely took a toll on just not only teaching, but life in general.
Yeah. What are some fun things that happened as an online teacher for 6-year-olds this year?
I was able to spend more one-on-one time with my students. Teaching in a whole group was it was too much for 6 and 7-year-olds. And I don't know. So I would do like a small group time for like 30 minutes and be like, hey, here's what you have for today. If you have any questions, just let me know. And then after that, I just scheduled one-on-one time with each student. And I loved that because I think for them, I think they grew more by being able to read with me just one-on-one. And usually at school, I'm used to reading like in a small group. So I took that. We went back in person at the end of September, 100% in person. We didn't do hybrid anything. And so I kept that same mindset of just doing individual one-on-one. And I think, considering my kids didn't get to finish kindergarten and kind of started first grade virtually, doing one-on-one helped them grow a whole lot more than I've ever seen before, just with social skills and reading skills and life in general. So I kind of hope to maybe keep that in the future. I know it's like taboo at our school to not do small groups for reading, but I think they grew more individually. So I loved figuring that out in quarantine and implementing it back when we came back in person.
That's cool. Do you have a favorite kids book that maybe was a favorite of yours that you also like to read with your classes?
I have favorite authors. Mo Willems is a big one that my kids love. He writes like the Pigeon books and Elephant and Piggy, and being able to like do the voices for him. And Robert Munsch, probably the most familiar book you might be familiar with Robert Munsch is Love You Forever. I think that's the name of it. But he has, the rest of his books are very funny and not as serious as that one. So those are our two favorites that we like to read out loud a lot.
It sounds like there's been a lot of like fun pieces even amidst something. And I also, I'm curious, like, what was it like to go back to in-person school before other places did as a teacher? Yeah. And how did you kind of balance that?
So we had planned to do, I think it was like the first 2 weeks virtually. And then our first week never happened because our network in our whole county was hijacked, so we couldn't even do virtual learning. So then we made a plan to do hybrid, and that was a little stressful for me just because I knew that the second there were more people in the building, I wasn't going to get to see my family because both of my parents were high risk. And so that was a lot to come to terms with, but we made a plan for hybrid and got everything situated, and we were supposed to start, I think, maybe a Monday. And the governor came on Wednesday afternoon and said, actually, if you're in elementary school, you can go to plan A, which was in person, if you wanted to. And so our county immediately said, all right, we're doing it. So we had 24 hours to take our hybrid plan and turn it into 100% in person. And then they came back that next day. So I myself was not comfortable with that because just at that time there were so many unknowns, and I didn't know like how it was going to work. Like there were still unknowns of that many people in a building. There was no way I was going to be able to keep my students 6 feet apart, not being able, like basically being shut in my classroom all day, every day, because we couldn't use the cafeteria. We ate in our classroom. We couldn't share the playground with anyone. I couldn't even like talk to my team. So it was very stressful starting out, and I knew in the back of my mind that it was more important to have my students there in person. I knew they were going to learn more and get more out of being in person, but just health-wise, I just wasn't comfortable with it. And so I wrote letters to all the board members, and I guess I learned that our county and our school board don't really care what the teachers say. Like, I hate to say that, but that's the feeling I got, is they were like, no, we're doing it this way. In the county I'm in, it wasn't taken very seriously. Like masks weren't really a thing. COVID wasn't really a thing. And just feeling like, wow, they seem more concerned about high test scores than how your teachers mentally were feeling. So it was a lot to take in.
Yeah, no, that's a lot. And it's interesting because we had a very, very different experience here. And I mean, Oregon is still not even fully reopened as a state. And our schools didn't even start opening until April. So it's interesting to think about long term. I wonder what it will look like for students that had a very opposite school year this year.
Sure. And
I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. Like,
well,
5 years
even
ago.
in our state, like they left it up to each county. And so our county was like, we're going back 100%. It's going to be great. The students need this. Whereas there are still some counties in our state that did not go back. They stayed virtual. And our county just kept talking about like our high test scores and how great it was going to be. And I thought, well, what are we even comparing ourselves to? Like, you can't compare us being 100% in person to a school that was 100% virtual. Like, it's definitely apples and oranges. It was just, I don't know. Like, I love my students. I had a great class. I loved my parents. They were super flexible, but as a whole, it was just like, man, no one really cares about me as a person.
Yeah. I'm glad that you made it through the school year, and I'm glad that it sounds like midway through realized like there's a lot here that maybe I could lean on some other resources for.
Absolutely.
And so one more kind of fun question. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Maybe flying, because I am always late to everything, and then I could get there faster. Because it's not that I'm purposely late because I hate being late. It's I think I have more time to get all of this done before leaving, and then I realize it takes me a little bit longer to get there. So I definitely think I'd rather fly because I could just get there a lot faster, and I'd spend more time procrastinating, I guess.
Yeah. And another question someone who watches the recordings likes is, if you are a Harry Potter fan, which
Yes.
Harry Potter house
I'm a Hufflepuff.
is yours? Okay. How do you know that?
I felt like I was a Hufflepuff when reading the books, but then I took like the legit quiz, and then it said that I was. I was like, okay, I can go with that, because I'm definitely not a Slytherin. I'm not creative enough to be Ravenclaw, so.
Yeah. Let's see. I want to dive into some of our questions of like thinking back to yourself in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So take a minute and like think of high school Beth. Um, how have things been different than high school Beth imagined life would be now?
High school Beth was very, I guess, insecure, just cared more about what other people thought. I would still say that I'm still struggle with confidence and being insecure, but now it's like I'm never going to see these people again, so I don't really care, even though it stresses me out and I'm nervous. High school Beth hated talking in front of people, especially strangers. I still do not like that now, but I just tell myself, hey, you're never going to see these people again. Or it's at the end of the day, it's not as stressful as you're making it to be. So just being able to kind of let things go and not care about other people while I'm taking care of myself.
Cool. And the theme of this is kind of like, it's okay not to be okay, which is also focused on like resilience. So can you tell us a story about maybe something that helped you develop resilience when you were a young person and how you made it through that?
Yeah. I guess I wouldn't say like young, but maybe more so in high school. Just being able to like bounce back from the way I thought things were going to go or different situations. I think more so in college, when I realized like, again, like other people's opinions don't matter. And so being able to like bounce back from stressful situations or heartbreak, obviously heartbreak in high school is a lot different than as an adult because you don't know you don't know a lot, or I felt like I didn't know a lot. And being able to bounce back and kind of like move on with life and realize, hey, this is just like one small moment of my day or my month or my year. There's so much more to look forward to. I can't really think of anything specific other than just like high school breakups or college breakups, relationships, and or friendships. Like thinking I've had the same friend all through grade school and high school, and realizing like it's okay to not be friends with them. Not that anything bad happened, but just like I don't think I knew me. I didn't know my people. I was just friends with them because we were together all the time, and realizing like who I truly connected with and who I could trust.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, teenagers and like friends I have in my life, have shared over the last year, like we've all really kind of realized like, what do I like to do? And like, what kinds of people do I want in my life? Or what kinds of people do I not need in my life, even if I want them in my life? Let's see. The question from that, I don't remember what it was, but it might come back. What is kind of a word of advice that you might to students as they think about going back to school in the fall after, in our state, being virtual for nearly a year and a half? Like, what are some things that you would want them to think about or know, or maybe tips and tricks?
Yeah, just being able, I think the only way I got through the stress of going back in person, I mean, for obviously like things are a little different. We've learned a little bit more health wise. I think things are a little bit safer now, but just doing it one step at a time, whether that's one like block of school at a time, one 10-minute section of time, one day at a time. And then when you find yourself getting like overwhelmed or stressed out, like kind of taking like a deep breath and a step back and just like pushing through and just knowing that tomorrow can be totally different. And I even tell my students that at the end of the day, you know, like even if we get frustrated with each other or we get upset or stressed out, like that's today, let's start it brand new tomorrow, and not kind of hold on to that, to the grudge or whatnot. Just making sure that you take care of yourself. Like that has been the biggest thing for me, is just like figuring out what it means to take care of myself, and what I need specifically at different points or different times.
What have you learned for you that it means to take care of yourself? Like, what are kind of some things that you've learned, and how would you encourage somebody to start learning that if they don't know the answer for themselves?
Yeah, I realized, I guess it was around Christmas. So we had been back in school for, I guess, 3 months. And it was just a lot, like so many changes it changed. The rules of everything changed on the daily. Like I would send a student home because they had X, Y, and Z symptoms. And then the next day I was told, no, you don't send them home for that. It's changed. And it was just a revolving door of unknown and unchange. And so that, on top of trying to teach, on top of trying to like allow my students time to just like connect and tell me how they're feeling through all of this, because I know this is something that they're going to possibly carry for the rest of their lives when they look back and they're like, oh yeah, in first grade, like we wore masks all year long. It just got to be too much where I just found myself, I was super unhappy. I couldn't get through, like, there were mornings where I didn't even want to get out of bed and go to school because I just don't want to deal with it anymore. And so I guess thankfully I just happened to have my annual doctor's appointment and had someone on my side who was like, look, like, let's take care of this. Let's not worry about all the other things until we get this under control. And her just having someone that I knew was a professional, she knew what she was doing, and suggesting medicine for me was, I think she could tell, like when she mentioned it, I was like, oh, and she's like, no, really, like this is okay. It will just take the edge off. And I told her that I didn't want it to like completely change who I was. Like I didn't want to not feel any emotion, but it would be nice not to just randomly cry at any point in time throughout the day. So having her, and then a friend told me about a counselor and reaching out to her and meeting with her and having just someone that was not biased on anything that was going on in my life, and being able to update her and her help me like work through like why I was feeling the way I was feeling, how to make it better for me, what I could do differently, just so that I was kind of getting me back with all the stress on top of all that. So having that in my corner and just having friends and family that understood that and checking in and making sure, hey, it's okay that you're asking for help. And we're here for you too.
Thanks. I'm sure it was really scary at first to take those steps. I'm curious, like now having been doing some different things for a few months, if let's say if a teenager is noticing maybe some signs in their friend that they're doing super well, maybe mental health, what advice would you have to help them start that conversation with their friends? Because that's a big thing that we don't often teach in school how to do.
Right. And I think that was a big thing for me, is like it's so taboo to talk about, oh, you're getting help for this or you're taking medicine for that. And then I think it was once I finally like gave in to like, hey, I need help, I can't do this on my own. I began to realize like more and more people, like probably like most of my colleagues that I work with are all doing the same exact thing. And just, I guess, to start that conversation, just say, hey, how are you doing? Like sometimes people just want a way to just vent without trying to fix it, just to listen. So like listen to actually hear what they're saying as opposed to listening to trying to make a plan to fix it. Yeah.
That's great. What's the other question? Oh, thinking back to yourself as a student, what are some of the moments in your life that like were unexpectedly helpful from people at your school? Or like favorite staff members that were unexpectedly great?
High school wasn't super great for me. I was ready to get out. It was not a great experience, but thinking back on, I think elementary and college were my favorite school years. But just having those teachers that it's not all about teaching the material and the test and the exams, but like actually checking in with you and seeing how you're doing. Even after being done, I mean, it's been quite a while since I was in elementary school, but I still have teachers that will check in with me. Like my 5th grade teacher sent me a message the other day asking how the school year was, how I was doing. And we actually talked about how I was doing counseling and taking medicine. And she was like, I've been doing that for 30 years. There's nothing wrong with it. It's like, but no one ever talked about it. And just knowing like, it's okay.
Yeah, which circles back to the question, like the theme of it's okay not to be okay. What does that mean to you? Like, how did you come to accept, like you've kind of shared a little bit, but like, what was it like to actually accept that phrase as true for you? Because I think we
Yeah.
often are like, yeah, for everyone else.
Right. I think I just got tired of people saying like, how are you? And me saying I'm fine when I knew that I wasn't fine. And being okay with, hey, today's not a great day, but that doesn't mean tomorrow is going to be an awful day. And just taking it day by day and just knowing that I couldn't do it on my own and realizing that because I couldn't do it on my own, that it was okay for me to ask for help because there are people that that's their job. That's what they do every day. And they being able to know how to help people on whatever level they're at, whatever they need at the time. And just, yeah, I just remember having a conversation with my mom at Christmas, talking about how things were going to be different. And I think that's when I finally like completely lost it because I was so tired of like not being able to see my family and all of the changes that had happened through COVID that I was like, I'm done with this. And she was like, okay, well, as your mom, obviously I want to fix it, but I'm not the person to do that. So I think just having that one person that was like, you need help and it's okay. And me being able to accept that, yes, it was okay. Because now, like, I mean, obviously there are still hard times, there's still stress, but knowing that it's not the end of the world and it's okay if I'm having a rough day, but knowing that there's also a light at the end of the tunnel, that not every day has to be an awful day.
Yeah, I think that's been really hard, especially over the last year, because sometimes there's a lot of information on the internet and the news that might make us think otherwise. So, has there been anything that you've learned through counseling or anything else you've done in the last few months that's like a go-to easy thing you can do in the middle of one of those hard days that you'd recommend us looking up?
Yeah. One thing that my counselor had me write down was to take time for me and take care of Beth. I think she says it almost every week. Like, whether I'm complaining about something or I'm updating, she's like, but did you take care of you? And how did you take care of you? And me having to not just say yes, like she wants to know specifically. So like making sure that whether it's going to the gym or just like having time to myself or making sure I'm around people if that's what I need for the day, like just knowing what it is that I need each day depending on whether it's my mood or my day, but figuring out what I need each day just to take care of me, even if it means just something small just to get through the day if that's what I need that day.
What did you do today?
Well, today was my only day of summer break since school starts tomorrow. Summer school starts tomorrow. So I went and got a pedicure. It's been a year and a half since I have gone to get a pedicure. So that's what I did today. It was very exciting.
That is exciting. Thanks for giving us time on your day as well.
Sure.
Those are the questions that I have. I'm curious if anyone else here has questions they'd like to ask Beth. Or if there's anything else that you just want to make sure that we hear from you.
I had a question. I was wondering, I loved your stories about teaching. What kind of helped you decide that path?
To become a teacher?
Mm-hmm.
My kindergarten teacher. Originally, she had the coolest pens. And I thought that the only way I would get to have really cool pens is if I was a teacher because I thought they were teacher pens. And then in kindergarten, the assistant that I had, I didn't know she was an assistant. I thought we just had two teachers. But I had her in kindergarten, first grade, third grade, and fifth grade. Like she kept just moving up. And her name was Miss Matthews. And I just thought if I could be just like Miss Matthews, then I would have it made. So Miss Matthews is the one that was like, this is what you need to do. And my mom at the time, she worked at the employment office for the state, helping people find jobs. So she made me take many aptitude tests because she was like, no, you don't want to be a teacher. They don't get paid anything. And I was like, oh, we'll see. And every single test, I think it was after the third or fourth one, she was like, okay, fine. If that's what you want to do, go do it. But just know you're not going to get paid anything. And I was like, I'm not in it for the money. Now it's a little more stressful being an adult, but that's just what I've always wanted to do since I started school. So I can't imagine doing anything differently. Like, I don't know if teaching didn't work. I have no idea what I would do.
I'm sure it's hard to narrow down one moment, but what's been a favorite moment of yours in the last 2 years of teaching?
I'd have to say I was pretty blessed this year and last year with just a great class. Like, I think teaching through COVID could have been a whole lot worse if I had a class that was just really hard. But I had the best parents and the best students. And so just being able to like connect with them, and this year, my kid, like, I never had an issue when it came to like following the rules of like the masks and staying apart, because I think my kids knew that if they didn't follow the rules, then we wouldn't be in person. And just being able to like build a community with both of those classes, and knowing that whether I am their favorite teacher or not, like, I'm always going to be their teacher that got them through COVID, even though we still could be doing crazy stuff next fall. But just being able to be a part of that and us navigating it together and trying to figure out like how life was going to work each day. And I think I spent most of the year saying, well, guys, like, this is the plan today. It may not be the same tomorrow, but we'll get through it. And by the end of the school year, I didn't even have to finish the sentence. They would just finish it for me and say, but we'll get through it together.
Oh, that's sweet. Speaking of getting through it together, what was it like as a team to be like really separated at first, and maybe you got to see each other more? Like, how did you all come together as a teaching team?
It was really tough. There's 3 of us on our team. We had a new teacher on our team this year, and then we had a teacher who, she was new to my team, but not new to our school. And she was retiring this year. And I know for her, technology wise was super hard, just because it was foreign to her. And so trying to help her out, which I was very willing to do, I could just tell she was super frustrated. And I truly feel bad that like, this is how she went out, was with COVID. And so I just didn't get to talk to them as much. And it's a lot easier for me. Like, if I have a thought or something, like, I can't run over to your room, so I'll just send you a text, but that wasn't really her style. So it would be at the end of the day and she'd be like, oh, I got all your texts. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that was 3 hours ago. But then our other teacher on our team, I had her son in my class. And so I think we just connected more because I was able to talk to her more about her son. And we just were more the same age, and we just have a lot of the same things. So as a teacher in the building, it was awful because usually the only time I get to talk to people is at lunch in the cafeteria, which we couldn't have, or at recess, which we weren't allowed to do recess together. So I just felt very alone. I just felt stuck in my room all day, every day. But then I had the one teacher who I could just text, and I felt like she and I were a little more connected. But it was definitely hard to never see anyone, like, even in different grades. I never saw, the only people I maybe saw was like my principal when she came to observe me, and maybe someone that was passing by in the hall if I had my door open.
Wow, it's that piece of like together but alone in a very different way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you had to, for a semester, teach a high school class, what would you teach and why?
Ooh. Could I teach childhood development? I remember taking that class in high school, or it was like something, I think ours was called like teacher cadet or something, that kind of got you prepared. I think I might have been the only one in that class that actually wanted to be a teacher. I think other people just took it because it was easy. But yeah, I would want to do something along those lines, or maybe math. I was a big fan of algebra. I really liked that class, so I could teach that maybe.
It'd be fun. What's something that you think people who haven't taught or worked with 6-year-olds would be surprised to learn about child development?
They are a lot more independent than you think. I think when people think about kindergarten, it's all about like snotty noses and tying shoes. Same in first grade too. But I am constantly amazed at like how independent they can be. Like, if I give them an assignment or ask them to do something while I'm working with someone else, and they get it. And I think that really comes from like building that community and relationship with them. But there were times this year when I didn't have my assistant in my room for one reason or another, and I did have one virtual student. And so having to tell my kids, hey, like I'm working with her right now. You guys have to do whatever it is that I've given you and try not to ask me questions just so I can give her undivided attention. And as soon as I log off with her, I will help anyone in any way that they need. And so I think as a 6 or 7-year-old, people just assume like you have to do everything for them, but it's pretty amazing. Like if you just build a relationship with them, they get it and they understand it. And it's impressive how independent they can actually be.
So I worked for 2 years at an elementary school. Wasn't something I ever expected, but it's fun because I didn't know how to talk to them at first. So I would just ask them the same questions I ask high schoolers, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it's fun because they have thought about it, and also like they work really well together. I think surprisingly, we don't often think that kids can problem solve, and they're good at it. They might use very different words, but they're great at it.
They may take 10 extra steps to get there, but they'll get it eventually.
Yeah. Well, Nikki, did you have any other questions?
Sorry, I had one in my head and, oh, I remember. So like you had shared how you were kind of, I'm not sure exactly, all the details of what you've gone through this year, but it sounded like there was some struggles, there. If someone else, how would you encourage like other high school students to like kind of take inventory like you were, and how would they reach out like if they were maybe feeling some of the same things you were?
Yeah, for me, I think I realized when there were days where like I wasn't motivated to do anything and I knew that I was not myself. I feel like for the most part, I'm a pretty happy person, and it didn't matter what it was, nothing could make me happy. Like hanging out with friends, talking to friends, like I just didn't want to deal with anyone. At the end of the day, I just wanted to go home and go to bed. And then in the morning, I was like, nah, I don't really want to do this. And being able to realize like, hey, something's not right. This isn't how I usually am feeling, or at least a year ago, this is not how I was feeling. And being able to just have that like breakdown moment and to have someone that said, okay, well, if something's not right, like you need to do something about it, as opposed to having someone like try to fix it. And just being able to listen and be like, okay, like you're right. Like I didn't want to be miserable every day. I didn't want to just randomly cry at any point of time and not even know why I was upset. So just kind of looking back on myself and realizing something wasn't right, and that obviously I was not able to fix it on my own, and trying to figure out who could help me. And I think it was a mixture of just like having a great doctor who was willing to like check in with me. Like even after she like prescribed medicine, like she made me do a virtual call with her a couple weeks later, to see how it was going and then what our game plan was. Because ultimately I told her, and I told my counselor, that I don't necessarily want to be on medicine forever, but right now, like this is what I need. And what can we do from now until whenever that time is, to make sure that when I do stop taking it, I'll still be able to like figure out how to take care of me, and then be okay if for some reason I need to start taking it again, and just making sure I constantly am checking in with my counselor. And even though we started out meeting weekly and now we've moved to bi-weekly, but knowing she tells me every time before we finish, it's been over the phone for now because it's COVID, but every time right before we hang up, she says, now, if you need anything before we meet again, please call. And in March, I had to put my dog down, and just being able to like send her a message and say, hey, if you're not busy, like I'd love to chat. And she being open and available, and she called me from her house. She's like, no, like let's talk through this. Like, let's get through it. Cause I mean, it was definitely a fast, it was unexpected. But I knew it was a decision that I needed to make. And so being able just to have someone that was unbiased, like that could just listen and say, okay, well, how are you feeling? How can we get through this? What can we do just to get through the day and tomorrow and the next week? And yeah, so just having that team of people that you trust.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it sounds like a lot of the things are just like having a team and like knowing that we're not really meant to do everything by ourselves.
Absolutely. And having friends too that I'm saying, hey, like I'm not in an okay place right now, but I just need you to check in with me and just check in often and just say, how are you doing? And just make sure that I have not like fallen into a deep hole. And yeah, even though there's nothing that they can do, I guess there is, but like just saying, hey, that's all I need from you right now is just to check in and make sure I have not gone back to the depths of the depression that I was in.
Yeah, technology definitely, especially for young people that use social media maybe more than we do, it can be a two-sided thing because it can make you feel very connected and very alone at the same time. Kind of like what I heard you talking about in the building. Like there's all these people around, but they're not talking to me.
Right.
So let's see. My final question is just like, do you have a favorite quote or some sort of motivational mantra, quote, book, movie thing that kind of, if you're in one of those days, you just reflect on that or watch it? And we've been crafting a list of things from people, and I've got a lot. I've got everything from Moana to Titanic to Tupac, so nothing is too
awesome.
Yeah.
My grandmother used to always say, I know it's not her quote, but she always used to say, this too shall pass. And so just like knowing like today may be hard, but tomorrow can be different. So just knowing like it's not always going to be like this, just to keep like pushing through. Like it feels like it's going to be like this forever, but eventually it will get better.